All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone out there in television land. And so, welcome to the 1 o'clock session with Ken Cousin. And he's a Java champion, of course, and also author of some books. And his talk is on data-oriented programming and REST APIs. So, without further ado, Ken, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. For all the people who are here, I hope you're having a good time attending the conference so far. I know that once I'm finished this, I'm planning to watch a whole bunch of the sessions. It's just before that, I've been trying to get mine ready, as you might imagine. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the concepts behind data-oriented programming, which is a relatively new paradigm. It's not really all that new, but it's new to the Java world. And I want to comment on how you basically can use it, especially with the latest features. Oh, hey, Simon, good to see you. With the latest features in Java, especially ones that have been added in both Java 17 and then Java 21. And we're going to spend our time basically looking at code. I have a little bit of a couple of slides that once we're finished, I'll clean up a little bit and put in the GitHub repository. And then I'll just be answering questions as we go along. So feel free to add the questions whenever you want. If I don't have time to answer them right away, I'll tell you that. You don't need to self-censor. So that's oh yeah, it's certainly become as Simon said, it's become a lot easier to code with Java 17, and it's really interesting that way. So just for your information, for whoever wants it, oh, Hubert Klein, Ikiki is here. Yeah, Mr. Hockey is here. Wonderful. Great to see you, sir. It's been a while. At any rate, this is my contact information. If you need to get a hold of me later, my name's Ken Cousin. It just doesn't look like it. There's my email address, homepage, blog. I still have a Twitter handle, although I almost never go there anymore. I am on Mastodon and Blue Sky. There's the links to those. I have a free weekly newsletter called Tales from the Jar Side. Ha, ha, ha. It comes out every Sunday, hosted on Substack. So it's kencousin.substack.com. And I have a companion YouTube channel. Those are the books I've written in the past, and that's good enough. And yeah, Brian Getz wrote a good post about it. Well, funny you should mention that, because I'm going to link you to that. I'm going to show that one. Oh, you like the title. Thank you. And oh, Vincent, good. So good to see you. Any rate, let me just give a couple of bullet points, and then we'll leave this and go to the slide, to the actual code. The idea behind data-oriented programming is very counterintuitive for a long-time Java coder. It just feels funny, because the idea, instead of doing OO, which is to put data and operations that operate on the data together, it's to separate them. It's to focus on data and try to make it immutable, dealing with data that doesn't get changed at all, and then having behavior in the form of stateless services, like stateless web services, very common for that. So the operations are kept separate from the data structures, and that is completely a 180 on what I was taught when I learned OO back in the 80s and 90s, a long time ago. But there are some benefits to this, and it can be quite useful in stages. We do transformations on the data. I'll show you some examples of that, but immutability is a big consideration here, so that it works better in parallel as well. And the operations are often done with functional concepts like streams and so on. So like so many people, where I was introduced to this was an article that Brian Getz wrote in InfoQ some time ago. This is the name of the article, was Data-Oriented Programming in Java. I actually have it linked here. This is the one. So it's back in 2022. And the problem with data-oriented programming as applied to Java is a lot of the features that we wanted weren't really there yet, and they only really became effective in Java 21. What we're really going to need are records, but that's easy enough, and enhanced switch statement, no problem there. And then the pattern matching, and especially pattern matching for switch. And while we've had pattern matching practically from oh, I don't know, with instance of, it was Java 14, 15, something like that. In order to get pattern matching for switch, that didn't become GA or final until 21. So it's been a while for that one. So at any rate, this is an article and there's various takeaways in it. And whenever Brian Getz writes an article, well, I'm going to read that. I'm not necessarily going to understand it, but I do try to read it. The problem I have with this article is that his examples, if I scroll down here, are not exactly what I had in mind. They're not intuitive for me. Options about file types, input file, output file, max lines or whatever. I don't know. I just didn't see it. And then he went into algebraic data types. I mean, I don't know. There's really good stuff in here. And the more I look at it now, the more I go, oh, I think I'd understand much better now. But I had to play with it. And in order to play with it, that's when I went and said, all right, I'm going to make my own examples and dream up some of those. And I'll show you where I use this. And then I'm going to connect it to the idea of RESTful web services, both mostly from the client, the side of being a client for a RESTful web service, but you can use them for creating a web service as well. Oh, thanks for putting in the link to that article as well. So just to finish this up, we need records. Oh, that's the one I was forgetting. Sealed interfaces is another one that plays a prominent role in the whole idea here as well, of data-oriented programming and pattern matching for switch. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to let you know is this is the GitHub repository. Let me copy that link. And I think I can paste it into the chat. Oh, I lost my cursor. Yeah, there you go. So I was able to paste it into the chat, but it's just under github.com/my last name, KOUSEN, and I just called it data-oriented programming. And I've got a few limited examples for this, and I'm going to walk through it. I will mention before I leave the slides that there is, where's the, oh, I didn't show it here. Over here, there is a book from Manning that's in early access called Data-Oriented Programming in Java. There is an older book, and I think it might be an O'Reilly book called Data-Oriented Programming in General that isn't specific to Java. But this one came out or started last September. And I've been working my way through that one. I think they've only got like 3 chapters so far. Yeah, it's not show. Oh, there it is. Yeah, it's got 4 chapters going on. Looks like the 5th one's coming out as well. Maybe I need to update my copy. All right, now let me go to the code and let me close this. The first thing I want to ask you is if this font is big enough and the display, you're able to read this and everything. Do I need to go up another font size? Does anybody care? Is it okay with you all? And I don't see any complaints about it so far. So I'm going to assume this is okay with you, that you can see this. But if you need me to go up another size, I also find the darker backgrounds tend to project pretty well. Oh, thank you for that. The darker backgrounds tend to present pretty well on online calls, whereas if I was in a conference room, I'd use a light background. All right, so here's a really simple example of using records and sealed interfaces to represent different data types. So here's a user record. And by the way, this is a pattern that I've kind of adopted myself over the past couple of years. It's not required. Oh, Bill's here. Good to see you, Bill. It is not required, but I like doing it myself. I like seeing all my records together. And when you make records and you make them public, then like every other Java thing, they're supposed to be in their own unique file. And since I don't want to jump from file to file to file, I usually make a class, which I call something like whatever records. And I put my records in that class, and now they're like inner classes, that sort of thing. So I'll then do a static import of user records, and then the code will all be clean. And if I eventually do move it up to top level, all I have to do is take out the import. All right, with that in mind, what I have here is a record to represent a user in some security system. They have an ID, a name, and an email address. And I have an admin, and they're the same, except they also have a field representing some permission, some string here. So the idea of a sealed interface, which was adopted, I believe, in Java 16 or maybe 15, is that the idea with sealed interfaces is that you are now saying that this interface can only be implemented by the permitted classes here, user and admin. There are no other classes allowed to implement that interface. And that's kind of important on records because records are final. So you cannot extend a record, and records implicitly extend java.lang.record. So you cannot put them in an inheritance hierarchy at all unless you use interfaces. Now, I don't necessarily need to make this sealed, but the advantage of making it sealed is I know these are the only two that are ever going to exist, and that's going to tie into the pattern matching for switch. So if I make a user service here, and let's bring up the test as well, and then I'll close all that so we can see better. So here is a method, and notice this service is basically stateless. There are no attributes in this service at all. I have two static methods, one called getPersonInfo and one called updateEmail. And they both just take a person. They take the interface type. But I know there's only two classes that can implement that. So I can use the pattern matching for switch that was added in Java 21 to say, well, this person, it's either a user or an admin. Those are the only possibilities, so I don't need a default clause. If you use the enhanced switch statement that was added in Java 15 on a regular basis, you know that they have to be exhaustive. You always have to have a default clause, or at least make sure you cover all of the types. Well, because this is a sealed interface, as long as I have both cases, I've covered both types. Now, I'm not doing anything terribly dramatic here. I'm just saying, well, I know this is a user, so I'll grab the name and email. And I know this is an admin, so I'll grab name, email, and permissions. And in case you were not aware, by the way, Java added a formatted method to string in Java 15. So that's kind of convenient. I like that as well. And then all my methods can take advantage of this. Like I have an update email method here that takes a person and a new email. And because the records are immutable, I can't just edit an existing record, but I can instantiate a new one. And I know which type to instantiate based again on the enhanced switch. It's not it's not a real persuasive case. It's more of a demo. You may not feel like, wow, I'm going to change my whole programming model to adapt this from this little example, but it is simple. It does give you an idea how they work. And if I have my test here, my JUnit 5 test, I instantiate a person and an admin, and then I assert that when I get the person info, I've got this string. And when I do it for an admin, I get that string. And I also can update the emails. Let me just run both and make sure they work, which they should. I mean, I shouldn't have any issues with that. Yeah, and they both pass without a problem. And it's kind of nice here. By the way, I'm using AssertJ for another testing library. I really like AssertJ, and I've found that the Spring people use that on a regular basis. So I've been kind of learning it. It's kind of the successor to Hamcrest matchers or what have you. It's just syntactic sugar, but it's really nice to look at. So there's my simple user one. I mean, nothing restful in any of that, just basic, simple example. Now let's go to something that's a little bit more interesting. And for that, I do want to access a RESTful web service. So what I have here is a service called open-notify.org. Oh, well, that's weird. Why is that going to give me a hard time? Yeah, go anyway. The problem with this service, by the way, is, as you can see, it doesn't support HTTPS. So like many publicly available services on the internet, it only supports GET requests, and it doesn't do, secure sockets or anything like that. And the idea is this was a hobby project by some developer who's consuming some NASA data and then exposing it through, well, a web service. And the one I want to look at is this one right down here, the number of people in space. And if I look at that, you see there's a little link to astros.json. And it will tell us a message of success and how many astronauts are in space at a given moment. And people will be a collection of name craft combinations. That's the entire thing. That's why I like this as a sample, because it doesn't collect any data from us. It doesn't require a key or anything like that. It's simple and easy. Is this a Java preview or what Java is it in? This part right here, I don't know what language he used to implement it, but I'm almost certain it's not Java. So I don't know what he did to implement it. I'm going to consume it from Java. But I will now show you the code I use to access this. By the way, if I just click on the link, because all it supports is a GET request, you can see what the output looks like. See, there's the collection with the people, with the array and the name craft combinations, and the number at the bottom of 12 and the message of success. You can see there are 3 astronauts aboard the Chinese space station, the Tiangong, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere near correctly, and the rest are aboard the ISS, including poor Butch and Sunita, the Boeing astronauts that got stranded up there, you know. All right, now let's look at the code. Sorry, the other way, to see how I'm doing that. So here's my records again that are going to line up with that JSON structure. This is my record to have the combination of name and craft. So I called it astronaut. Sometimes I call it assignment or something, but it's a connection of a name and a craft. Do I need to enable preview features? No. If you're using Java 21, everything in this repository will work for you immediately. If you are using an earlier version of Java, using 17, then you would need to enable preview features in order to use the pattern matching for switch. That's the only thing that would be different. Okay, so here's my response. It's got a list of those astronauts and an int number and a string message. So that I'd need to do no matter what. Here's the sealed interface, and this is where you start to see, hopefully, where you might want to use this stuff. This is a structure. Well, let me define it first, and then I'll say where I've seen it before. I've seen it in several places. So this is an interface called result, and I'm going to claim that, let me get that out of the way. There's only 2 types of results, success and failure. That's it. There's only 2. So it makes sense to make this a sealed interface because I know there's only 2 possibilities. And then I can prepare my client who's going to get back a result can prepare for exactly those 2 possibilities and know that there'll never be any other. So a success is going to take the data that I get back, this astro response, and then I'm going to do a grouping by operation to group the astronauts by craft. So rather than just see the individual astronauts, I want to say how many are aboard each craft in orbit at the moment. And it implements result. And so does failure, where I'll just take a string out of the error message and put that in there and make that a result as well. So with that in mind, here is the Astro service. So in this case, I'm going to do everything with the HTTP client that was added in Java 11. One comment I want to make on that, in the HTTP client in Java 11, it did not implement auto-closable. And in Java 21, they revised it to implement auto-closable. So you see it here, I have it wrapped in a try with resources block. If you're on versions of Java earlier than 21, just take that out of the try with resources block. That's all. But this way we guarantee that it's closed. So there's the API, there's the URL I'm going to, and I'm going to use JSON as my JSON parser in this particular case to split everything up. So I wrap the HTTP client in an instance here. I use the factory method to instantiate it. Then for my request, I use the builder and set the API and set the header. I don't really need to do that. It doesn't hurt anything. And then the send method will assume, based on my request, that I'm sending a GET request. That's the default. In my next service, I'll use a POST request. But this is a GET request, sending that request, and then the response.bodyhandlers.ofString is a way of saying what response we get back, just turn it into a string. There's a whole bunch of options there. There's of lines, of file. I've often used of file, like if I'm getting back an image and I want to just save it directly to a file, or deal with a byte array or a stream. I thought there was an of input stream or output stream. There's options there. But here I just want the string back. So I get back my response and I check to see if the status code is not a 200, then I'm going to extract the status code out of the response, say there was an HTTP error, and wrap it in a failure. So result is the interface. It has two types. It's got the success and the failure. Remember, that's what's over here. Oh, and by the way, I did this one slightly different than the other, if you happen to notice that. In the user records, here's the interface, and then here are the records at the same top level as the interface. And this is what you'll see in most cases. But in this one, I followed a pattern rather over here that I saw Brian Getz do in his article, which is that when he defined his interface, he made the records inside it, and it worked just fine there too. And there's really no great priority of one over the other. You can pick whichever one you like, but I thought I'd show you both so you can pick whichever one you prefer. Okay, so going back to the service, if something goes wrong, I wrap it in a failure, and my return type up here is the interface, its result. But if it works, then I will convert the body of the response into one of those Astro response objects. I'll do my little grouping by operation, which is down here below, and return a success instead. And now the client who's using this can prepare just for a success or a failure. This is the grouping by, in case you're curious about it, I use a stream grouping by craft, mapping the name to a list of astronauts on that name. And here you can see there's the print. So I'll run the main method, but I'll show it to you in the test as well. Notice how this works, though. You instantiate the service, you call the method, and you look at the result, and it's either a success or a failure. So in this case, I expect it'll be a success. I think the site is up. And you see what I get back is the astronauts currently in space. There's the craft and the astronauts and the craft and the astronauts. That's the grouping by operation there, if you will. And if I look at my test class, then here I grab the data and again did the switch to say if it's a failure, assert the failure contains that string I put in there. And if it's a success, then grab the astronauts by the craft and assert that. Now this one's a little fragile. I just happen to know that at the moment there are 2 craft in space right now with astronauts aboard, and I know their names. So that I probably should update that and just do something like saying, check that I got a success and whatever. But that is, it will work just to demonstrate that it's passing. Okay, so this is using a client. And the thing I was going to say about this is that this, no, over here in the records, this mechanism of using a result with only 2 possible values goes by various names in other languages. I think the Scala people call it the trimonad, I believe. I've also seen it referred to as the either monad, because again, there's only 2 possibilities. Java doesn't technically have monads because we still have nullable problems, inside there. But this is basically the Java equivalent of that monad. Now, where I first saw a success and a failure was in the Android world, and I saw an example that did that in Kotlin, where they had a success or a failure. And you can, of course, generalize it to various states that an object might go through, and that way you'd have a switch statement for only those states, and those would be the only ones available, like registered or in process or completed or in default, whatever you like. And you could use a very similar pattern for that. So you see, I've got the data separated from the operations, and it feels a little funny, but records are immutable data structures anyway, and they already have 2 string equals and hash code in them. They work very nicely. And the other thing that's nice about records is you can do compact constructors. You can do transformation and validation on them, which brings me to my next example. So for my next example, we have to do an AI one. Every presentation by law is required to do an AI example, right? So I'm going to use 2 different AI examples, one very simple and one a bit more complicated. You're probably familiar with the Ollama system. The Ollama system at used to be Ollama.ai, now it's at Ollama.com, is a mechanism that allows you to run large language models on your local hardware, run on your local machine. So anything you ask it isn't going to some cloud provider somewhere or isn't going to the AI company. You don't have to worry about the NSA listening in on it or what have you. It's also free, although you pay for it indirectly in the cost of the hardware you're running on. I mean, you have to have a pretty good machine to be able to run any of these decent models, because the models get really big. So if you install Ollama, there's a download and everything. The next step is to go to the list of models. There's the one that got all the press last week, the Chinese DeepSeek one. Heating in the winter. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, there's the DeepSeek R1 model. That's another one of these, what do you call it? A reasoning model to compete with O1 and O3 and everything. I'm not going to look at that right now. What I want to do is take advantage of another feature of Ollama, which is that Ollama also provides a REST API for all those models. So running the models in a command prompt is one thing. Running it right on your local machine, that's fine. But if I want to incorporate it programmatically into Java, I need an API. So if you were to go to the GitHub repository for Ollama, then they have a link to their RESTful web service, their API. And this is how they've got a couple of mechanisms for doing chat completions. And if I scroll down, they have this generate endpoint. So you send a post request to the generate endpoint under API, and there are various prompts or model parameters you put in, like the model name you're using, the prompt you want to send in the question in containing. I don't use the suffix. And then optionally, and this is where life's going to get interesting for our purposes, you can upload a list of base 64 encoded images and then have the AI model interpret what it sees on those images. So I would like to see both of those possibilities. I want to do a chat with the model using just straight text and a chat using the images. Now, if I scroll down a bit to see a sample, let me go past this one. Yeah, here is a curl request to give you an idea what it looks like. You send it to you run on localhost 11.434 by default, whatever you want to set that to. API generate, you put in a model, a prompt, and turn off the stream, because this one does streaming outputs by default. So you get like one word back at a time. Yeah, I want the whole thing right now. So I set the stream to false. And this is what a request looks like for just straight chat that's not streaming. Now, if I scroll past this, where is the example with the vision model in it? Which is here, request with images. You see here, they picked a lava model. That's llama with a V for vision there. By the way, there's also a model called baklava, inevitably, as you might imagine. At any rate, what is in this picture? The stream is false, and the images, in this case, it's actually got only one element in the array, but that's a base 64 encoded string containing the image. And fortunately, in Java, we've got a base 64 encoder built right in. Okay, so let me go directly to how I did this in the code. Here are my Ollama records, and I'll bring up the Ollama service and the Ollama service test, and that way I can get things out of the way. So a text request has a model and a prompt and that stream parameter. But a vision request has a model and a prompt and a stream parameter and a list of string that represents the images. One of the things that Python has, part of why AI models use Python, that Java still does not, is optional or default arguments in methods. I mean, I'd like to be able to say, oh, I'll just leave that images parameter in and just not set it. But then I'd have to check it. I'd have to supply something. Life gets complicated in Java. Normally you'd have an overload or something like that. And we just don't have default and optional parameters in methods. A lot of APIs get around that by using builders. But builders introduce another layer of complication, and they work very effectively, but I'm not going to go that way. So here's my Ollama text request, and here's my Ollama vision request, and my sealed interface is just called an Ollama request, permits both of those two and only those two. Now, here's the other neat feature that a lot of people who work with records are not familiar with. This guy, isn't that interesting? That looks like a constructor, and it's called a compact constructor, but you see it doesn't have any parentheses after it. I mean, how weird is that? I mean, we're so used to every constructor has parens. This one does not. This one is invoked with every instance of the record that you instantiate. And I could have overloaded constructors in there if I wanted them. But what it's used for is for transformation of the data and validation of the data. So what I'm going to do is, in order to demonstrate the validation, I'm going to say, you know, this list of strings, I'm going to assume that my client is going to upload file names for local files where the images reside. And then I'm going to take that images array, turn it into a stream, and I'm going to encode each image into a base 64 encoded string. And this is the private method to do that. I just go read all the bytes from the file into a byte array and base 64.getEncoder.encode to string. That's one liner in Java to convert a byte array into a base 64 encoded string. So this little private method here I'll apply it to all the images in that array, and I've encoded them automatically. That's an example of transformation. Down at the bottom, I've got the response, which has a lot of properties, but I'm only using these few. And this is my message, which also, by the way, gives me a chance to do validation. So again, compact constructor to say that the role inside the Ollama message can only be user or assistant or system, nothing else valid. And therefore, if we got something that isn't that, I'll throw an illegal argument exception. And I think that's more than I actually did. So if I look at the service here, this again works better in Java 11. In Java 21, I probably need to update that and put it inside a try with resources block, but so be it. There's my local host I'm running on my own machine. And here I'm going to use JSON, and I take advantage of JSON's capability to automatically convert camel case in Java into what they call snake case in JSON data, you know, lowercase with underscores inside it. And that way I could print it. But notice here, my method to take the request and return the response has the enhanced switch statement in it. It says, okay, switch on that request. Are we a text request? Then I'm going to log, oh, this is a text request and here's the prompt. Are we a vision request? I'll log that it was a vision request. I'll print out the size of the uploaded image and then print out the prompt. But the code down here, which is wrapping the request using JSON to convert it to a string, sending it as a post request to the service, and then getting back the response and parsing it. All of this is in terms of just Ollama request, doesn't care what kind of request it is at all. It's just going to use JSON to convert it both into the data we need to transmit and converting the response into an Ollama response. I mean, that's all you have to do. Okay, so here's my test on that. So let me start at the top here. Here's a text request. Now, when I instantiate it, I got to pick one. Now, I could go into my service and create some factory methods, you know, say, oh, okay, here's a factory method to create a text request, or here I could put in a method that took an optional, you know, took a nullable array or an empty array of images and say, if it's empty, I'll do a text request, else I'll do a vision request, whatever. You can make the user interface easier for your users to deal with. But here I'm just going to explicitly create it. Now I installed last week was Microsoft released their 5.4 version. It's one of those small text-based models. And I'll just say, hey, write a haiku about Java development. And let's see what we get out of that. Now it takes a moment on my machine to load the 5 model. So the first time I run it'd be a little slower, but after that it'd be really quick. So there's my text request to 5.4, and let's see if we got anything decent. Lines of code weave. That's 4 syllables. So we're already off. Infinite classes and dreams. Java's heartbeat strong. Yeah, okay, whatever. Elegant syntax. That's 5 syllables. Objects in harmony. Sing, that's 7. Code blooms like springtime. Okay, that's 5. So, okay, it can happen. It looks like it's giving me a whole bunch of them. Look at that. Okay, any rate, that worked. And now let me do a vision request. Now I've got a couple of vision models. I've got this Llama 3.2 vision model, and I have Llama 3 as well. Here, let me start with this one. Let me show you the image I'm going to transmit. It's this one right here. I mean, after all, if we're doing AI, you know, how do you not think about Skynet and all of those? Oh, was there a question? Making text and vision requests to an AI service. That's exactly right. Oh, what am I trying to implement? Yeah, sorry, I'd missed that comment. It's basically all about accessing a RESTful web service, but I'm able to access it from Java in one block of code, even though I'm doing both chat and vision. And in the final example I show you, I'm going to use Claude, you know, and the AI from Anthropic, and show I could even do mixed messages and things like that. It just keeps the infrastructure simpler this way. So this, here's my text I'm going to be sending on this thing. My company logo in the image is building the robot shown. See, again, I closed it, but here it is. There's the logo in the image. My company is building the robot shown and wants me to embed an AI model into it. What's the worst that could happen? And you see, I put in the path to my file name as a JPEG. And then when I call generate the vision there, it's going to automatically convert that into a base 64 encoded string and transmit it. So let's see what I get on that one. Now that'll take a moment because that one has to load the Llama 3 one. Oh, that's pretty quick. And let's see what we get. So here's the echo of it says, there's the model name. The size of the uploaded image was a 200K roughly. There's the prompt. And here's the response I got. The worst case scenario for a robot with embedded AI could be related to misuse or malfunctions of the AI system, leading to unintended or dangerous outcomes. In other words, it totally got past it, that this is Skynet and this is bad, you know, but okay, it worked. That's the bottom line. For the chat stuff, I've got examples like using Gemma to put conversations together, or one up here, just a streaming one to see what the streaming one looks like. And I think that's it. So I've got several of those in there. I just thought I'd give you an example. So again, the concept is that 90% of the infrastructure code doesn't need to change at all. All of this, that's the part that transmits the message to the AI and gets it back. And that doesn't care whether this is a vision request or a text request. The only thing that I did is use this switch statement up here to print out some logging information for my own purposes. There was a comment there. I wonder how it would react if you put it on Asimov's foundation. Yeah, exactly. You got to see if these robots follow the 3 laws or what have you. I did watch a YouTube video a year or so ago that pointed out that those 3 laws have serious logical flaws in them and wouldn't work anyway. But, you know, give another year, we'll find out. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so let me close that. Now, that is as simple as I could make it. You see, the actual JSON data was really easy in that case. There was just a single value that was different between the 2 types of requests. I did have to handle it differently, but one had a list of string in it and the other didn't. If I go to Claude now, so here is Claude from Anthropic, and you want to play with that. So if you're going to run this one, by the way, you need an Anthropic API key. But you could see here what a request and response looks like. I'll magnify it here. This is in curl format. So you see there's the endpoint. Here are all the required headers, including your key. And the data in this case specifies the model, the max tokens, and then messages is an array of role and content combinations. That sounds simple enough. But if I go down to the vision one, let's go down here, look how much more complicated the vision model is. Now, same headers, nothing's a problem there, but the messages block now has role and of user, and content is an array which contains an image type and source with type, media type, and data. There's the base 64 encoded image. And then there's a second message here of type text. So there's a type image and a type text, both in the same object here. And in fact, there's really three possibilities. There's the possibility where you have a role of user and just straight text. You have a role of user and content with a text message in it. And you have the role of user with content which has an image and a text. All of those. So this can get a little hairy, but I did the mapping and everything, and let me show you what they look like. So let me open up all of those. And here's the test as well for that. So let me get this out of the way. So I'm sending a Claude message in the request. I've got the model. I have a system prompt. I got max tokens. I didn't set this one up to use the automatic conversions of camel case to underscores. So I put in the serialized name just to be on the safe side. Temperature. And here is my list of message. So this always happens. You always have that message. This is a list of message. Message is, in fact, going to be my sealed interface, or rather my first sealed interface. Message is either a simple message, which down here you see just has a role and a content. That's all it is. Or it's a text message, which has a role and a list of text content. Or it's mixed, which has a role and a list of content, where content is my second sealed interface, which is either text content or image content or both. That one took a little bit of playing with, but you know, the easiest way to come up with these records and these interfaces and everything is you take the JSON structure and you paste it into Claude or OpenAI or whatever and say, hey, give me Java records that correspond to this. And then when it does, you say, no, I want sealed interfaces in there too, and it'll try to do that. In other words, this is something that the AI tools do well. You know, it's something that is known and understood. It's just a little tedious. So you're asking it to do the help for you. And the bottom here is just the response that comes out of it. That's the output. I didn't do anything with that. So I've got two nested sealed interfaces here, but it does keep the code simple. So there are, here's Anthropic's key. I'm reading it from the environment variable. These are the current models for Claude Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. They don't have a 3.5 Opus yet. So I put in constants for those so I could refer to those and not type the name in wrong. Oh, I did set the field naming policy. I guess I could take that out, take out the serialized inputs. But you see, this is the one block of code that looks a little tedious, but it's really not. It's very simple. It's just setting a bunch of headers, makes it look like a lot. And this works for all the different types of messages. I'm taking an interface type that was a class, which has all the interface types in it. A Claude message request, I convert it to JSON data. And in my HTTP request, there's my endpoint. These are headers that Anthropic tells me to add. There's the API key and the accept and the content type header. This one's a post request. And then here is my HTTP client, which just sends it and converts the response or converts this text back into a response, and I'm done. So I only had to write this once, even though I've got all these different types of messages going on. And if I look at the test now, here I can write a haiku using haiku, about Java development. And I think I wrote a sonnet about sonnet, or I asked it to write a sonnet, and an opus about opus, using opus or whatever. All three about Java development, but boy, I said it weirdly, but that was the idea. Use haiku to write a haiku, use sonnet to write a sonnet, and opus to write an opus. I'll run through that one really quickly. I did that as a nested test so that I could actually run just those by themselves. So while that's running, maybe move that down a little bit. Here is mixed content with my image in it and everything. So let me show you the image that I'm loading this time. It is basically cats playing cards, cats playing poker there, which I generated using, I can't remember whether it was DALL-E 3 or the Black Forest Labs one, which I really like. That's a really good one, by the way. That image generator is excellent there. What do they call it? I'm blanking on the name, but that's a good one. All right, so let's see. What did we get with our haiku? Did we get a decent haiku? Code flows like water. AI whispers algorithms. Java springs to life. I can live with that. How about the sonnet, the digital muse? In IDEs where code and thought combine, AI assistants guide my Java way. Yeah, okay, we get the idea. I mean, you don't really want to, it will follow the right structure, but I've never been happy with the poetry. The Opus one took a while because look at what it did. It generated this thing. It kind of, oh, that didn't go on too long. That's not too bad. I got 376 output tokens. Not too bad at all. Okay, then let's do the image one here. So this is mixed content. I load the cats playing cards image and I encode it here. And my request is going to 3.5 sonnet. Haiku doesn't handle vision requests at the moment. Oh, hey, good to see you. Here's another one. Here is my, I didn't have put in a system prompt, but you're no doubt aware that you can put in system prompts and give it global context. You know, you are a, or write your responses as though you're a pirate, something like that. Do it in pirate speak, something like that. Here's my max output tokens. I put the temperature to make that fairly variable. That's the degree of randomness in the output. And now my messages are mixed content. I've got, in the role of user, I have the image and image content. There's my base 64 image and my text content. And I'm just going to ask it what's in that image. That's all I'm going to do on that one. So let me execute that. It's very simple. And it will upload the image and send it to Claude and then give me back a description of what we got out of it. And what did we get? Let's see, this is a humorous and well-staged photo. It was an AI-generated photo of 3 cats playing poker, styled after the famous dogs playing poker paintings. The cats are dressed in formal attire, blah, blah, blah. You can go with that and use it in any way you want. One usage I might consider for something like this is to generate alt text for images. If I was going to put them on a web page or post them in social media and I need alt text for that, or you put it in as a caption, perhaps in a blog post or something. And as long as you identify what the source of the output is, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. So there's the usage of the image. And to do text this time, just straight text, let me put in, write a cover letter for a Java developer applying for an AI programming position written in pirate speak. And those are generally entertaining, I got to admit. It's live? Oh, yeah, we are live. So feel free to ask whatever you like. Here's a cover letter in pirate speak. Ahoy, mighty hiring crew. I be writing to ye about the developer position in your fine vessel of artificial intelligence. Me skills be sharper than a cutlass and me code be more precise than a navigator's chart. For many a moon, I be sailing the treacherous seas of software development. Aren't we all? At any rate, you get the idea. I was able to access these AI tools comfortably using this combination of records for mapping to the JSON data, sealed interfaces in order to put the records together using an interface and sealing it so I know exactly what types to prepare for on the output, and then using the enhanced switch statement to be able to distinguish between those individual records and bring out the information. And that kind of in a nutshell is data-oriented programming in Java. Now, the controversial part again, so anyway, I listed all 4 in the slides there. Again, I'm going to add this set of slides to the GitHub repository because there's not much there. The advantages that they argue, again, I don't know if there's a lot of data on this, but the argument is that performance will be good, again, because you're dealing with immutability. You got a lot of immutable objects and stateless web services. Oh, by the way, I've got one stateless web services joke in case you want it. I say to you, I think that every web service should be stateless. And then you say back to me, really, why do you think that? And then I say, why do I think what? Yeah, as you might imagine. I think I have something for that. Wait a minute, where did I put it? No, I can't find it. I think it's here. Is it still here? Instant rim shot. Yeah. There. Thank you. That's what I needed. I needed that for the backup. Okay. So they're supposed to be performant. Oh, good. I got a couple chuckles out of it. That's good. They're supposed to be performant partly because we're dealing with immutables and partly because we're dealing with stateless web services. So they can fire up, run, shut down again. They have a certain degree of simplicity, although you could see they can get a little involved. You wind up with nested ones. Now, one of the advantages of the data-oriented programming focus is that you are focused so much on the structure of the data types, the input and output data types, that you make it impossible to submit invalid data. You actually are saying, no, it can only be one of these. It can only be one of those. It's not just some generic string we have to parse or validate. In fact, using compact constructors in those records, you could do the validation or any transformations you need right there. It's supposed to be good for concurrency, again, because we're dealing with stateful or stateless services and immutable objects. And testing is supposed to come out nicely there as well. Now that you've seen something like that, hopefully you can go back and take a look at the Brian Getz article or at the books that are coming out and see whether this is something you might want to use. Again, the controversial part from my point of view is, I was taught from day one of object-oriented programming, you put the data and the methods that operate on the data together in a class. And here we're ripping them apart. But we're not ripping them apart everywhere. And it's not like we're throwing away all these methods and everything. We're just focusing on the fact that the input data can be modeled as records. The JSON data for a RESTful web service can be modeled as records. And by using interfaces, I can put records of different type together. And then by sealing those interfaces, I can make it much easier to figure out which type I have and not having to have extra or worrying about the possibility of somebody putting in something I hadn't accounted for. It's not even possible for them to create one. The information simply won't work in the system. That's basically what I had for you. Are there any other questions, comments, words of wisdom? Heard any good jokes lately? Let me go back to where the GitHub repository is in case you want to see that. Well, that's, again, pretty straightforward. And by the way, here again is my contact information. Vincent said, Ruff said another video about, I'm sorry. Was there a comment you want to make? I thought I heard the moderator. Let's see.
No, I should mute myself.
If you like. Maybe someday we'll still use, you're still on Java 11. I get it. The industry is shifting. However, the Java 17 stuff is being driven, again, this is anecdotal, but the Java 17 move is being driven a lot by records and other features too, but records are the ones people want to use. They go together with JSON data like that. It's really useful. The move to Java 21 is being driven by the interest in virtual threads, because virtual threads are part of 21. I suspect that 25, the next GA release, will have structured concurrency in it too. And I can tell you in Android, once coroutines came out in Kotlin, reactive stuff went away almost overnight. It was amazing. I don't know if that'll happen in Java, obviously. Okay, there was another comment about, the best part of UDP jokes, it's that the other person doesn't get it. I don't care. Exactly. Yeah. If you don't get my UDP joke, I don't know it and I don't care. Yeah, exactly. That's an old one. I like that one though, too. Yeah. As you can see, I don't come up with these. I suppose I should say, take my Wi-Fi, please. Yeah. I know that's terrible. Any other questions? Sorry.
I think only us older generation folks would get that joke. But
yeah,
many of us.
I am finding that I deal with a lot of undergrads these days, and 90% of my jokes, they just kind of stare at me blankly, like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. I actually made a comment about Skynet in an AI class. They had no idea what I was talking about. I was appalled. That's not good. Those who forget historical movies are doomed to, build the next generation of the Terminator franchise. Okay. And then Bill, I got the rim shot in there. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else you're curious about or commenting on? I figured by putting all the code in there already, by making it so it was already written. Oh, there's again the article from Brian Getz.
Yeah.
I figured that way it would save us some time, and the conference will be going on the rest of this afternoon, and Monday and Tuesday. And I also have to comment. I have a whole series of videos on my YouTube channel, the Tales from the Jar Side channel. I hope that helps. And feel free to keep in touch. I'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks a lot.
Oh, this is awesome. So thanks, Ken. This was good. I should use SEAL classes more. I haven't really. I don't know. I just forgot to.
That's the thing.
Java think about design. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're right. Java people are just not as familiar with them. We don't think in that term. And I wasn't thinking in that terms either until I saw them in Kotlin, where they did that success and failure one. And I went, oh, that makes sense. I can work with that. And then it all built up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll have to go back and look at some of my projects and see how I can implement that. So, but yeah.
And it's the first time in my life I finished a presentation 5 minutes early. So,
But this is good. If there's no other questions, I guess we can say, bid everybody adieu, and look forward to. There are 2 more talks coming up. We have Bruno Sousa coming up on his developer master plan.
Bruno's always great, by the way. You don't want to miss Bruno. He's always very good.
Oh, absolutely. It's he visited with us at the Garden State group the last 2 times, but unfortunately I was away, pre-planned, travel, and so I hope to see him at DevNexus. But and at 3:00 we have Rafael De Niro talking about cracking tricky Java code challenges from Java 8 to Java 24. So that should be cool. But excellent. All right, folks. Again, thank everybody for coming out today, for not just Ken's talk, but for everybody else's. I've seen a few familiar names throughout the day and yesterday, so thanks for coming out. Thanks, Ken, for your awesome presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing you the rest of today and next week.
My pleasure. I was really glad to be here, and good to see everybody. Take care.
Take care.